My name is Josh, and hey, quick story time about me to help you understand a lot about me really quick. I grew up with my sister Ashley, who was a spaz and an extrovert. Where are my extroverts at in the house? How many extroverts? You like people, but you're selfish because you drain the life out of us introverts like me. Where are my introverts at, okay? Yeah, we're selfless givers to be here tonight, and we have to be drained out by all you extroverts. So, my sister Ashley was the one extrovert of an entirely introvert household, and she was also a spaz. So, basically, for me, I enjoy taking my one day off Saturdays pretty slow in the morning. Anyone just sleep in real hard on Saturdays, don't have a care in the world, right? And so I remember doing that, and then my spastic extroverted sister Ashley decides it's wake-up time. And so she bolts into my room. I guess she was like attempting to pounce on me, but in her attempt to do that, puts all of her body's force, stubbing her toe on my metal frame of my bed, falls over as if she lost her leg, and screams and cries. Now, I am able to numb this out. You know how to numb out your sibling's screams? Raise your hand if you got a sibling. Siblings, okay, yeah, so most of you guys understand exactly what I'm going through here. And so I am just able to numb it out, close my eyes, and immediately go back to sleep. 2 seconds later, I hear from the basement my father scream, "Josh!" And so then all I wake up to, and it's like a slow-mo video of my dad on bear crawling all fours, sprinting up the stairs like vicious death in his eyes and Mountain Dew stains on his chin. And if this just helps to paint the picture, my dad also did Elvis impersonations on the side, so he looks like the great value Elvis, running up, then pounces onto my bed, and time stood still, and I knew this is the day I die. And so after getting the most unjust beating of a lifetime, thinking my sister will plead my cause and say it was an accident. Josh had nothing to do with it. She didn't think that was an interesting enough detail to add to the situation. And so after having 1 HP left on my bed, I'm not even out of my covers yet, my sister says, "Dad, it's okay. Josh didn't do anything. I just stubbed my toe." I'm just like, res me now, res me. And my dad just looks at me and goes, "Sorry, boy," and just walks out. Just walks out. Anyone else have dad problems? Anyone else? Yeah. Half joke. But it's kind of like a genuine thing. Like, it's kind of like in pop culture these days, you heard of the thing, the father wounds, right? That we all have wounds because of our dads, or me and my friends, as terrible as is, will make fun of the idea of having dad problems. But even though that's a joke, the reason it's so common culture today, I think, is because, let's be real, your family influences you, right? Your family influences you. That could be for better, or it could be for way worse. And whether you like to admit it, your view of your dad matters. Your view of your dad matters. It affects your ability of how trusting you are developmentally as a young kid. It helps you understand your complex of what love is. It influences why you do or don't do a lot of things. Maybe your work ethic. Maybe you're too ashamed because of what your dad has said to where you just have thrown in the towel and you don't really even give it a try. Some of you, because of your dad, positively have a really healthy, not arrogance, but like a confidence because they instilled dignity into you. But some of you feel pressured by your dad's approval, right? And so everything that you're doing, you're having in the back of your mind, I just want my dad to say I'm proud of you, that I love you. Some of you have such bitterness towards your fathers that really bitterness is the fuel that drives you. You'll do anything, you'll achieve anything if it can prove your dad wrong. But really, that's not actually what we're going to be talking about tonight. You didn't come for a therapy session. But I think that topic helps us think through a question that's really even more essential to each and every one of us. And one of the most important things about you, in fact, is how you answer this question. How do you view God the Father? How you answer that question might just be one of the most important things about you. So yes, this is at church. I guess that's no surprise that I asked a question like that. I'm asking you point blank, what do you believe about God? Or another way of testing what you actually believe, let's say that God himself opened those doors and walked in, made a direct fixed gaze at you, and you couldn't get away. What do you think would happen? What emotions would that evoke in you? Whatever your answer is to that question really is one of the most important things about you. And to actually help answer that question, if you have your Bible, we're going to be in Luke 15. If you don't have your Bible, it's totally okay. It'll be on the screen. But to help answer that question in Luke 15, I want to share a story that Jesus shared with a crowd of people. And it really is all about answering that essential question. How do you view God the Father? So when Jesus would preach, funny enough, there were actually a lot of various different kinds of people that would gather around to hear what this Jesus guy was talking about. The diversity of the crowd, though, was there, but like it kind of mixed like oil and water, because you would have, kind of no duh, the very religious people, right? And I imagine they sat at a different spot than all of the very not religious people. But there were a lot of surprising people in the audiences of Jesus when he would speak. There were a lot of prostitutes that are noted. There were tax collectors, which basically was this idea of they were Jews who, in order to make a quick buck, sold out and abused a lot of their own Jewish people. Kind of like maybe the emotion that they had towards tax collectors might be the emotions that we would have when we see, for instance, a drug dealer and their negative influence on a local community. Does that make sense? So that's similar in how they were seen. But additionally, there were alcoholics in the crowd. There were racists. There were people of other religions. There were people that were just broken and that were outcasts. A lot of variety and diversity, and the people that were religious, the religious elites in the crowds, they would actually roll their eyes and judge all these other people that were attending Jesus' talks. The religious people, in fact, got offended at Jesus eventually, saying, why, if Jesus is so holy, this godly leader, why would he allow such nasty sinners into this kind of conversation? And if that weren't bad enough, then Jesus at the after party, after the teaching would be given, he'd go hang out and have food with the sinners. And it drove the religious people nuts. And in light of that, Jesus shares a story with the crowd, and it's known as the parable of the prodigal son. So if you have your Bibles, it's Luke 15, starting in verse 11, Jesus says this to that crowd. So that there was a man who had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of property that is coming to me. And so as we already kind of probably understand in this room, children are often the ones who get a slice of the parents' inheritance, right? I think that's like no duh for a lot of us here, but question, what usually has to happen in order for the kid to get the parent's inheritance? They have to usually die, right? The parent has to pass away before they get the inheritance. And so there was something extra mean about what this son was asking of his father in this culture. With the cultural background of what this son was asking, he wasn't just asking for inheritance. This is what he was basically saying by his actions. Dad, I don't value relationship with you all that much. In fact, you'd be better off, more valuable to me dead so I could have your stuff. I don't want you. Can I just have the stuff? That is probably the single most selfish, wicked, evil thing any kid could say to their dad, right? It was so bad, in fact, that the laws of the day back then would actually say it's totally okay to stone that son. And some of you are like, stone? Oh, sweet, nice reward. Oh, no, not that kind of stone. That's like AD stone. I'm talking about BC stone, like to death, like with rocks hard, right? That kind of stones, being stoned to death. The dad had every legal right to do that to this son for saying that. You want to know how he reacts? It goes on and it says, and the dad divided his property between them, the sons. What? He just gives the son what he wants. And it's no small inheritance. This would have been generations and generations and generations of wealth accumulated and used. And this would have been unbelievable wealth, property, possessions entrusted to this son to be the guy to end the next generation to make that wealth even more prosperous, right? You know, maybe you're thinking, well, maybe this son was just like a little too amped listening to one too many David Goggins podcasts and listening to Gary V reels, and all of a sudden decided he's just gonna make it happen. He's gonna get that bread. He's gonna turn this money into an even bigger fortune. He's gonna be an entrepreneur. He's gonna put his blood, sweat, and tears into this, build an empire. But no, that's not actually what this younger son does. Verse 13 says, not many days later, the younger son gathered all that he took and all that he had, and took a journey into the far country. He wanted to get as far away as possible. And there, it says, he squandered his property in reckless living. This son with his actions, flipped off his dad, took generations of wealth, and wasted all of it for the thrill of the weekend, from prostitute to prostitute to prostitutes, from thrill after thrill, high after high, until there was nothing left. That's what verse 14 says. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and he hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into the fields to feed pigs, and he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. That dude went from 100 to 0 real quick. Went from the thrill, the high of life, to absolute rock bottom. Going from drinking his fill, the good life, to this. To absolute desperation. Now he's in the mud. He's in the pigs, and he's so low of a worker, he can't even get pig food to eat on his lunch break. And by the way, pigs in this culture, in the Jewish culture, were considered unclean, basically meaning homeboy could not then just waltz into a church because he was with pigs and he's muddy and gross. And you know what? I think all of us in this room probably unanimously say he had it coming to him. Good riddance, right? He deserved that, and this wicked, selfish sellout of a son, man, he deserved it, right? I think at this point, though, he came to be honest with himself enough to say he deserved it too. Because it says in 17, when he came to himself, he said, wait a minute, how many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread? But here I perish with hunger. Okay, so I'm going to get up, I'm going to arise, I'm going to go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Instead, treat me as one of your hired servants. So he's finally honest with himself. He knows he's an idiot. He knows he's stuck in the mud, literally. But he's still able to remember his dad. And he knows what kind of damage he did to his good dad. He knows just how big of a debt he would now have to pay his dad. The problem being, he doesn't even have a penny to begin to pay that debt back. But he came to the end of himself, at least. He came to the end of himself. He knows that he has no right, after all of that, to be a son. And so maybe, instead of a son, at least he could maybe be a servant. Earn it back one day at best. Verse 20 says, and so he arose and he came to his father. But hold on, can you imagine that moment where the prodigal son returns to the father? Can you imagine the shame of that son? Or can you even imagine the feelings that that dad was having in that moment of seeing his son? The verse continues, and you wonder what kind of reaction is going to take place here. And it says this, but while the son was still a long way off, his father saw him, felt compassion, and ran and embraced him and kissed him. The son couldn't even get onto the yard of the house before the father had already seen him and sprinted after him. And I'm thinking, how was the dad able to see him and then be so quick to run after him? Well, it seems that just because the son's heart had left the father did not mean that the father's heart had left his son's. The moments that the father's eyes sees his son's eyes, he was evoked with compassion for his dear, beloved son, broken, probably seeing how messed up and raggedy and starving he looks. And here's what's so crazy. It says that the dad ran. How many of you see a dad running these days? It's rare in this day and time. It was uber rare back then. So let me tell you about the drip of the day back then. It was basically a robe. Okay, these homies were, even dads were rocking man dresses back then. Okay, that was what was in pop culture. And so this dad does a massive cultural faux pas, and he begins to run. And quite literally, this is what the Bible uses this in other times where it says he girds up his loins. Like there's a picture of him. This is what homeboy would have to do. Like this is what you do. Like, there's someone breaking into the house, and like pulling up your man dress, right? By the way, white girls, you know how like during the fall, you're in that time in the early fall where it's like freezing in the mornings. Like I'm gonna wear my hoodie and I'm gonna like put it on and be so cute. But later, like, okay, dads 3,000 years ago were doing it before you thought it was cool. Okay, just letting you know. Can you imagine this dad running, son, like just like beautiful and so goofy at the same time? The absurdity doesn't stop there, though. Remember, help me out here, where did the prodigal just come back from? A straight-up pigsty in the mud. The son is ceremonially unclean from all the mud and the pigs. And yet the father embraces that messy son and kisses him, which means something really important that you need to know. The father cared more about embracing his child than his child's mess. He cared so much more about his son that he doesn't even mind the fact that embracing him means he's going to get mud all over him. He doesn't care. The dad's just happy to embrace that mess if it means that he can get his son. They can change clothes later. Who cares? Now it's just about the father and the son being reunited. But the son, funny enough, seems to be too blind and ashamed in his sin to even realize how much the father's meeting him with grace right here. It's really funny. So he goes on to the pre-planned speech that we already heard. And it says that the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you, and I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. And the dad just cuts him off from his dumb speech. It says, but the father said to his servants, bring quickly the best robe and put it on him. And here's an important thing to notice, that the father loved the son in his mess, but also loved the son enough to clothe him, to change him, to get him out of his raggedy, muddy mess, and to let him feel the warmth of love, the security of the nicest robe, and to be held with dignity and honor. He loved him enough to not stay in the mess. But it goes on and says that put on a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet. Here's why the ring is so significant. It's not, the ring is something that only the rulers of that estate would have the right to wear. It would be a signet ring. And it wasn't just some fashion statement, right? No, it was the father say, shut up about the dumb, I'll be your slave speech. You're my son. Everything that I have is yours. You're not a slave, you're a son. But even that was not enough excitement for the son. For the father to the son. The father goes on and says, and bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's eat, let's celebrate, let's have the best steak. For this, my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to celebrate. What if I told you that that's how God the Father sees you? Would you believe me? I'm going to ask you a really important question. Key in on this. How would it change your view of God if you knew that he was there waiting to embrace you with loving arms? How would that change your view of him? The Father's not denying where you've been. He's not denying what you've done. He's not denying what you've been through. He doesn't ignore any of it. He knows all of it. But he doesn't stand at a distance with shame, mocking you, saying, yeah, keep on coming. Clean yourself up. Get better. I told you so. No, he stands with arms open wide, and he's ready to take you in. That father's on the lookout waiting for the son to return. And you might say, that feels like too good to be true. That's not fair. There's no way after all that son's done. And you're right. Grace isn't fair. But it's exactly what you need. Grace isn't fair. That's the whole point of grace, is it's not fair. Like when the prodigal son returns home, remember, he's saying twice in this passage, I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Worthy. And after what we did, all of us are like, yeah, you're right. You don't deserve to be a son anymore. But let me put it a different way. When I was little, my grandparents had a massive pool, and so all my cousins would go hang out there every summer. It was awesome, but I was by far like the youngest cousin of all the cousins, and so my older cousin Wes was about 10 years older than me. I could swim I was pretty young. I could swim, but like not well. And so like any good older cousin would do, he sneak attack throws me into the deep end of the pool, And luckily my obesity was on my side, and so I could float pretty good. I came up for air after being shoved into the pool, and I just shouted at him, "Wesley, you're not my cousin anymore!" He said, "That's not how it works, moron," and then proceeds to drown me. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son actually doesn't make any sense. If you're a son, you're a son. Everything in us can't seem to believe. We resist, we recoil at that level of grace. Because that kind of grace is scandalous, religious people actually hate it. It's so scandalous how far that grace would go that the religious people, remember who Jesus is talking to in this crowd, they're ticked. Do you know the story actually doesn't even end there? That's like the popular thing that's often shared, but there's actually an older brother in this story who stayed at home working his tail off day and night every single day that the prodigal son was wasting away and partying and sinning. And when that party began for the prodigal son's return, the older brother actually refuses to even go in. He hates the grace that his dad extended to that prodigal son. And in anger, he says in verse 29, he says to his dad, "Look, these many years I have served you. I have never disobeyed your command. You never gave me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends." How much of a pity party do you got? I never got a goat. But when this son of yours comes home, who has, by the way, devoured your property, Dad, with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him? It's funny. Even though the older brother never left home, his heart could not be further from his father's. He has no idea what it means to be a beloved son. It seems like all he really knew, he had a false mindset, a false belief, false understanding of his relationship to his dad, and thought more so he was a good employee to his boss. He wasn't a dearly loved son. No. He was just a worker. He didn't know the love of the Father. He wasn't experienced. He didn't believe in that, and yet he was right next to him. In effect, the older self-righteous brother is saying this: I refuse to be in a family where this prodigal is welcome in it. That's what he's saying in his heart of hearts. So much so that all these religious people, they just hate grace, so much so that if the Father is willing to go this far for an unworthy sinner, there's a lot of religious people who'd rather go to hell and separation from God's love forever than dare to be in heaven with people like that. Interesting. You see, it wasn't the older brother's rebellion that was keeping him from the Father. It was his apparent self-righteousness, despite being by the Father's side all this time. You see, because some prodigals in heart aren't as visible with their sin. Some prodigals actually go to church every week. They read their Bibles. They do a lot of good things. They look the part, but they couldn't be further from understanding the grace of God or the heart of the Father. And it ends with a cliffhanger, the Father simply saying to that older brother, "It was fitting, son, to celebrate and be glad. For this your brother was dead, and now is alive. He was lost and is found." And so Jesus ends the story in this way with such a weird cliffhanger. Because it's almost like he's going from story to then like turning his eyes to you, those in the audience. And he wants each of us to decide. Don't let your shame or your pride keep you outside the party celebrating God's grace. You can fall into one of two ditches. You can either be so consumed with your shame, or you like the prodigal son who, remember, the father had already embraced him. He's like, "I'm not worthy. I can't be a son. I'll be a slave." He was so disgusted with himself, he couldn't just look up and see the loving embrace of his dad. Don't miss the party if that's you. Look beyond yourself. Look at what Jesus has done. Look at the love of the Father towards you. Or are you the self-righteous older brother who couldn't get past just how impressive he was to where he never could understand love and grace because he thought it was all about his performance. Get over yourself. Join the party of grace. How would it change your view of God if you knew, no matter how you came in tonight, that he was there waiting to embrace you with loving arms? Because if you believed it, you wouldn't run from him. You'd run to him. Whether you're the prodigal who's run from God, or you're the self-righteous, arrogant, religious older brother who's just as much a prodigal, the Father wants both of you to join in on the celebration of grace. And the song that we are about to sing in a moment is a prayer, a way of responding. It helps give us words to confess what may be going on in our hearts right now. And so I want to invite you. Let's stand now, and we're going to sing this about the Father's love for us, and then I'm going to come back up after that song, and we're going to give some more guidance moving forward for tonight. But for now, let's respond. Let's chew on what God has shown us so far. Let's sing. For your lovelessness, because he knew that for you and me, an eternity of hell could not pay off that massive of a debt against God. You see, we don't have to earn back the Father's love. Instead, we're really confessing two things as Christians. One, that I could never, on my own, be good enough for God to love me and to make me a son or to make me a daughter. It's to be totally honest and say, I could never deserve that. No way. But there's a second, more positive confession that we make. That despite us not being able to earn it, Jesus died for my sin, mine, so that I could have his life. And I'm saved by Jesus' grace alone. You see, you don't come to the Father with some, I'm going to try harder God speech. That's what Jamie tried to do. That's what I tried to do for years. No. Surrender is giving up the fight and accepting the embrace that is already yours in the Father. You might be very honest and say, but what if I don't feel lovable like that? Well, that's where the faith part comes in, because faith has to be more than a feeling. It's trusting not only that Jesus died, by the way, but that he rose again. And hey, here's the thing, guys, I want to free you and help you understand that if that tomb where Jesus was buried, if that tomb is now empty, your heart doesn't have to be empty anymore. It doesn't have to be empty, because the empty tomb is the proof that God not only died for your sin, but he also rose, proving he paid it in full, and he's more than enough, and now he's alive, reigning, extending his hand, saying, come and follow me. Experience joy of relationship with me. Lastly, then, take his hand. Join in the unending party of God's grace that both the prodigal son and the older brother were invited into. And here's the thing, join the party of grace, don't run back to the mud of sin. Don't run back there. Join the family of God's grace. Embrace the new robe that God has put on you. Walk in the freedom to know that your sin is paid for. You don't have to pay for a dime of it. Learn what it looks like to be a son, to be a daughter of God, and it takes time. Forever enjoying the family of grace over the fleeting pleasures of sin. But you can be a son, you can be a daughter tonight, and he day by day will show you how to live that out. And because he's worthy of putting my full trust in my eternity future, I think he's also worthy of me trusting him with my few days here on earth, right? That's what surrender's about. Surrender isn't just saying no to a bunch of stuff. It's not trying harder. Surrender is saying that the joy of celebrating grace is infinitely better than that slum pit of mud and sin. And I'm not going back there. No, I'm following Jesus wherever he takes me, even when it's hard. Even when I'm alone. But others for you, I'm going to be honest, there's others of you who are not ready to surrender everything to Jesus yet. Because it's a huge commitment. In fact, that's commendable, because Jesus does say that until you count the cost of surrender, you don't actually need to claim you're surrendering yet. You need to count the cost of surrendering to Jesus. Maybe you have plenty of questions, you have plenty of doubts. Just know this, we love you and we love that you're here. And in fact, you may have not heard this in a church, but we're excited for wherever you are on your own faith journey to join alongside you. We're glad that you're here, and you need to think through this first. That's okay. Here's what I encourage you to do. Don't let those doubts and those questions stay dormant in your mind. Share them out loud, even in a place of the church. The church is actually the place that we welcome doubts and questions the most. So where else would we find answers? So if that's you and you have doubt, you're wondering a lot of things, just don't doubt, don't wonder alone. Share it with somebody tonight. Let's start building some relationships. There's tough questions, but there's also really good answers. And so if that's where you're at, and you're not ready for surrender tonight, I respect that. Can we just continue to walk with you? Let us get to know you, meet you where you are. But I just have a sense that some of you tonight are ready to stop playing in that mud of sin. And you're ready to believe and to surrender everything to Jesus Christ. And here's how you know you're ready. You're ready when your heart can say this, that God, I have sinned against you. And I'll even admit that my sin is so big, so bad that I could never pay it back on my own. But Jesus, I also believe that you made a way for sinners like me. By living the perfect life that I failed to live and dying on a cross that honestly should have been mine. And you believe that in your heart of hearts. And then say, I believe that not only you died, but you rose again so that I could have a new life. And that God, I admittedly don't have much impressive stuff to give, but here's what I know, God. Father, all you want is all of me. And I'm gladly going to give all that to you. I want a relationship with you, no matter the cost. I surrender to whatever your plans are for my life and for my eternity in the future. And if you can say that with all of your heart, then tonight you are ready to surrender. But I'm not going to say it for you, and I can't do it for you. If you can say those things with your heart of hearts, now I want you to say in your own words to God. I want you to take a few moments now to respond silently. You can bow your heads, close your eyes, and talk to God. He can hear you. If you call out in faith, he'll hear every word you say. And I want you to respond to God in prayer. And for right now, I want some of you to have a personal prayer of surrender and faith to Jesus Christ. Take a few moments and respond to God in prayer.